different feature of the language. And I would like to welcome you all in this class. And today we are discussing about linguistics. What is linguistics? So how linguistics is defined differently, and then what different branches are there, that thing we discuss today. And especially our discussion will be to the introduction of the linguistics. Let me share first. Okay. Yes. Like this time we are talking about what is linguistics, to know about the language. Okay, so here I would like to ask you someone, what is your understanding you develop in terms of what is language and how the language variables are described in your courses? Jarana Neupani. Are you listening me? Jarana. Yes, so what did you understand about language? What is language?
Language is a vocal-to-vocal system of human communication.
Okay. Pooja Rizal. Are you listening me? Pooja Rizal. Hello? Pooja. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so what did you understand about language? What is language? Tell something. Hmm?
Language is the scientific study of linguistics.
Did you come to the previous classes or not? योभन्दा पहिला क्लासमा आएको थियो कि थिएन? There might be some internet connective errors for her because she is speaking what we are not listening. Okay. Anyway, so today we talk about the linguistics. Before that, we discuss about the language. And language is, we define what means it is the medium of communication. That means what? That is used to exchange the ideas. Whatever we know, whatever we want to share with others, there we use the language and we share the concept that we discussed. And today we are discussing about the linguistics, because language and linguistics are the different parts. They are the different parts, but they are different, or we can say they are in the similar way. They are in the similar paths. That means what? One deserves the qualities of another. One is about another. That's why we can say linguistics is of language. Without language, linguistics is not possible. So the main fundamental feature of linguistics is the language. Understand this thing at the first. That's why we have to know what is language first. If you know what is language, then after you know about the linguistics, because linguistics deals with the language in the sense that linguistics is the study of language. But the language has the different features. Language have the different variables. Our language has the different labels, and these things are studied under the linguistics. This is like, for example, it is like the college campus. Where do you go for the study? You go to college. Like this is like this is a Zoom, and from the Zoom you are studying. Like similarly, you can connect this. Zoom is one part, and your study is another part. Like similarly, language is one part, and linguistics is the connected part of the language one. Like your class is connected with Zoom or not? हाम्रो क्लास जुममा कनेक्सन छ नि त, जुमद्वारा हामी पढेका छौँ. It's like in the way the linguistics studies the language. That's what we can say. Just you can see in the slide here that you can see. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. Yes, linguistics is, you can see this point. What is linguistics? Is the scientific study. That another thing is language. So for that, what we should know at the first, what we should know means to know linguistics, to define linguistics. At the first, we have to know what is language that we discussed in our previous classes. If you know the language, then you can define linguistics, because linguistics does what? Linguistics studies the language. Linguistics is the way of studying the language. That studies the language. It is the way to study the language. That's why you can see linguistics is the scientific study of language. Like here you can see, yes, linguistics. This linguistic means that's the feature of the language. Whenever there is no S, yes, if S is hidden, this is known as the quality of language, a feature of the language. Whenever there is addition of yes, that is the study of this thing. The meaning of this S means study. The meaning of this thing means science. This means linguistics is the scientific study of language. You need to consider this point. Very genuinely, never forget this. In your mind, language is not the scientific study that Pooja told. Language is not that study, or language is the part. Language is the means of communication. Language is used to share the ideas. Language is the compilation of sign and symbols. There we talk about sign, signify, signified. There we talked about long and parole. There we talked about competence, performance. These things these are connected with the language. Exactly, linguistics does what means linguistics studies the language scientifically. So you have to know what is scientific study then. What is language? If you know these two things, then you can define linguistics clearly. This way, here we have some questions here downward. You can see yourself. So linguistics is the scientific study of language. Then we have to know what is language. Here you can see. What is scientificness? How we know what features are there to be the scientificness? What makes the thing scientific? Or what makes study scientific? And what do we study on it? यति कुरा थाहा पाउनु पर्यो. तपाईले के कुरा थाहा पाउनु पर्यो त भन्दा लिङ्ग्विस्टिक्स भनेको ल्याङ्ग्वेजको स्टडी हो, भाषाको अध्ययन गर्ने एउटा शास्त्र हो हैन. भाषाको अध्ययन गर्छ यसले. कसरी गर्छ त भन्दा साइन्टिफिक वेमा गर्छ, सिस्टमेटिक वेमा गर्छ. Not only the scientific study, it's the systematic study of language. It is the organized study of language. This means what? अब साइन्टिफिक रूपमा अध्ययन गर्छ भनेपछि साइन्टिफिक भने के हो थाहा पाउनु पर्यो. साइन्टिफिक अध्ययन कसरी गर्छ त्यो हामीले थाहा पाउनु पर्यो. That's why you have to define it as the scientific study of language. Okay, so you can see to be scientificness. Whenever you are dealing with the scientificness, then here you need to think about these three things. Yes, scientificness especially focuses to the three things. What makes ourselves scientific? I mean, scientific कसरी हुने त? यो scientific हो भन्ने कुरा कसरी गर्ने त भन्दा you have to consider these 3 points. Never forget. To be scientific, the first thing is we must have the inquiry behaviors. Yes, inquiry behaviors. Means what? Whenever we find something, whenever we see something, what to do? Either to believe or just develop some inquiry behaviors on that. For example, बिजुलीको तार छोएपछि करेन्ट लाग्छ. This is norms. You believe or not, for that you need to experiment yourself. करेन्ट लाग्छ कि लाग्दैन त? तार छुनु पर्यो नि त. करेन्ट लाग्छ कि लाग्दैन भने थाहा पाउनुको लागि अर्कोले करेन्ट लाग्छ भनिदियो. जस्तो मोबाइलबाट हामी टिभी हेर्न सक्छौँ भने मोबाइलबाट टिभी हेर्न सकिन्छ भने चाहिँ एकजनाले भन्यो, अर्कोले चाहिँ ए मोबाइलबाट टिभी हेर्न सकिँदो रहेछ है भन्दै हिँड्ने कि मोबाइलमा टिभी कसरी हेर्ने भन्ने कुरा खोज्ने त हामीले. त्यो भने इन्क्वायरी हो के. सो we must have the inquiry habit in us to be scientific. If you want to be scientific, you must have the inquiry behavior. Never take the something granted by others. But there might be some natural things. कति natural thingहरु हुन्छ. खोलाले बगाउँछ भनेपछि हामी खोला गएर चाहिँ बगाउँछ कि हामी खोलामा बस्दा बगाउँदैन त. These are the natural things. त्यो भनेर चाहिँ त्यतिखेर चाहिँ इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर भएन. That there is the madness. That will be madness. So this means what? Here we are only talking about on what means we have to develop inquiry behaviors in terms of the language components, like how to use articles, how to convert passive into active. त्यसलाई के गर्नु पर्यो, यस्तो गरी गर्दा के हुन्छ, यता गर्दा के हुन्छ. जस्तो like you are studying in online. Online पढ्दाखेरि के समस्या आउँदा रहेछन् त. जब क्लासमा जान्छ फेस गर्छ, then after you know, then you inquire in the classroom, you ask. This is called your scientific spirit. The person must have the scientific spirit on that. Then after, you can be the scientific. That makes the study scientific. खोज गर्नु पर्यो भन्न खोज्या. हामीसँग खोजको कन्सेप्ट हुनु पर्यो दिमागमा. मैले खोज्नु पर्छ, मैले रिसर्च गर्नु पर्छ. त्यो साइन्टिफिकनेस भने त्यो रिसर्चिङ बिहेभियर हो. अर्को के हो त भन्दा प्रिन्सिपल. देयर आर सम सर्ट प्रिन्सिपल्स that makes the study scientific. के प्रिन्सिपलहरु छन्. अर्को मेथोडोलोजी. तीनटा कुरा ध्यान दिनु पर्यो हामीले. एउटा निश्चित विधि हुन्छ यसको, त्यसका निश्चित स्थापित सिद्धान्तहरु हुन्छन् र हामी आफूमा के हुनु पर्यो, खोजको साइकोलोजी भन्नु पर्यो. खोज गर्नुपर्छ है मैले भन्ने कन्सेप्ट भन्नु पर्यो. जब हामी चाहिँ खोज गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने कन्सेप्ट बनाउँछौं अनि ती साइन्टिफिक प्रिन्सिपलहरुलाई फलो गर्छौं, जब साइन्टिफिक मेथोडोलोजीलाई फलो गर्छौं, त्यसपछि मात्र के हुन्छ, that will be the scientific study. Then after that will be the systemic study. Oh, similarly, linguistics inquiry to different language elements with its methodology and the principles. It has some principles, it has its own methodology. Based on the methodology and the principles, linguistics looks for the new ideas, looks for the new concept. That's why it is being the scientific. Just you can see here. Okay, so how many pictures are here? Could you see? I'm asking with Prakirti Singh. Prakirti, unmute yourself. Hello? Prakirti, are you listening me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so how many pictures you are
Yes, sir.
seeing? How many pictures you are seeing here? Pictures? 4 pictures. Okay, so with these 4 pictures, what do you think? Like, what do you think about this picture? के होला यो?
ग्लासमा पानी छ.
ग्लासमा पानी छ. भनेपछि त्यो ग्लासमा पानी छ चाहिँ हामीले त्यहाँ ग्लासमा पानी छ मात्रै भन्ने कि अरु केही पनि सोच्ने होला? हामी के सोच्छौं? त्यहाँ टेबल छ, टेबलमा ग्लासमा पानी छ, त्यो पानी देख्दाबित्तिकै हामी त्यो पानी पिइदिने कि अथवा त्यो पानीको बारेमा अलिकति इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर डेभलप गर्ने त फर्स्ट के गर्ने?
इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर डेभलप गर्ने.
त्यो कसरी गर्ने होला त? जस्ट टेल मी. ल एकदमै ल प्रकृति चाहिँ कता हिँडिरहेछ, बाटोमा चाहिँ एकदम आफूलाई तिर्खा लागेछ, एउटा टेबलमा चाहिँ गिलासमा यति पानी राखेर देख्यो भनेपछि what you do at the first?
त्यो पानी कसैले खाएको हो कि नै म खाम कि नै भनेर सोध्छु
Yes. So what do you think about this next picture? यहाँ के देखिरहेको छ यो पिक्चरमा?
पुल छ जंगल जस्तो छ फेरि
Yes. So what do you think? What different kinds of scientific spirit or inquiry behavior develops whenever you see this picture? के होला कस्तो होला हैन? Like in this picture, just see. What can you see in this picture?
एउटा बच्चाले हात जोडिरहेको छ
Yes.
के हो त्यति राम्रोसँग
देखिएन एउटा बच्चाले हात जोडेर बसिराखेको छ हैन भनेपछि बच्चाले हात जोडेको छ हामी भन्छौं कि बच्चाले के सोचिरहेको होला त्यो इन्क्वायरी गर्नु पर्यो के हामीले त्यो बच्चाले के सोचेर हात जोडेको होला किन हात जोडेको होला हैन जब त्यो कुरा हामी सोच्न थाल्छौं अनि त्यस नेक्स्ट पिक्चर यहाँ हामी के देख्छौं
डस्टबिन छ डस्टबिनमा फोहोर छ
यस
डस्टबिन भन्दा बाहिर पनि फोहोर फालिराखन
yes okay so these are the pictures from the different locations हैन जस्तो भनौं this is the picture of what means this is that is in the Tirshuli river हैन this picture that is the photograph from my own table at home and this is my daughter and this is the picture of Italy. Like you can see the different situation and in Nepal there you can find the naturalness like one small child is praying with the god in the temple. Yes, like here you can see in the foreign countries there is the management of what dustbin in the jungle. This is the jungle, this is the forest. हेरौ त फरेस्टमा पनि डस्टबिनको व्यवस्था गरेको छ ओहो यो देशमा त जंगलमा पनि डस्टबिन हुँदो रहेछ हाम्रो त घरमा पनि डस्टबिन हुँदैन भने हामी सोच्न सक्छौं नि त त्यतिखेर हैन सोच्न सक्छौं हो त्यो खालको इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर हामी डेभलप गर्न सिक्नु पर्छ भने हो okay then after I want to ask okay Goma Hirojal Goma today is your first class yes
sir.
okay so what different kinds of inquiry behavior you develop whenever you see these pictures these 4 pictures यसो गेस गरौँ त यो चारवटा पिक्चर हेरेर आफूले कस्तो इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर डेभलप गर्छ होला कुनै एउटा पिक्चरको बारेमा भनौँ त
Sir, this one picture or one child praying the God.
Yeah.
And I think he has also belief on God.
Yes.
And then next picture there is the management of dust.
Yes, sure.
And also we can manage the dust in the out of the home.
Yes.
And for the cleanness environment. And next is there is the
okay, thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. But whenever I ask, just I'm asking with I asked with Pooja. Then next thing, okay, Sunita. Okay, Sunita, are you listening me? Sunita, hello, Sunita. I think she is not listening. Okay, then I'm asking with Resma. Resma, are you listening me? Resma?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so like here is one glass that you are seeing. Then whenever I told, in the glass there is like how do you tell the water, the glass is half full or half empty? Such as if I tell the glass is half full and the glass is half empty, how do you take these two concepts? यदि मैले भने जस्तो मैले चाहिँ हेर्दाखेरि ग्लासमा आधा पानी भरिएको छ अथवा ग्लास चाहिँ आधा रित्तो छ भने कुन कन्सेप्टलाई तपाईँले फलो गर्नुहुन्छ?
यो पानी कसैले खाएर राखेको हो कि जुठो हो कि भनेर सोध्न सक्छ।
मैले यो गिलासमा भएको पानीलाई भन्दाखेरि ग्लास आधा भरिएको छ भने एउटा हैन,
हजुर।
ग्लास चाहिँ हैन आधा खाली छ भने तपाईँ कुन कन्सेप्टलाई बढी फोकस गर्नुहुन्छ?
गिलासमा पानी भएकोलाई।
आधा भरिएको भन्नुहुन्छ कि आधा खाली भन्नुहुन्छ? अब त्यहाँ रिसर्चिङ बिहेभियर
भरिएको नै भन्छ।
जस्तो यो भरिएको भाग जो छ नि
अनि एउटा
यस
एउटा ग्लासमा चाहिँ किन खाली राखेको हो र एउटा ग्लासमा चाहिँ किन पानी राखेको भनेर रिसर्च गर्न सकिन्छ।
यस स्योर। भनेपछि जस्तो अब यहाँबाट मान्छेको
र
एटिट्युड
सोध्न पनि सकिन्छ।
फ्रम हियर वी क्यान नो द एटिट्युड अफ द पिपल। जस्तो भनौँ त्यो मान्छेले कता हेरेर बोल्दो रहेछ त, आइदर द्याट पर्सन इज पोजिटिभ अर नट, द्याट इज नट। जस्तो भनौँ द ग्लास इज हाफ फुल भने उसले यहाँदेखि यहाँसम्मको भागलाई भन्यो नि त, हाफ फुल, यस। एन्ड ग्लास इज हाफ एम्प्टी भने यहाँदेखि यहाँसम्मको भागलाई भन्यो उसले होइन, द्याट इज कट। जस्तो मानौ सपोज इफ समन इज सेइङ द ग्लास इज हाफ फुल भन्यो भने उसले के गर्यो त, पानी भएको भागदेखि यो तल्लो भागसम्मलाई भन्यो होइन, द ग्लास इज हाफ फुल। तर चाहिँ अर्को मान्छेले के भन्यो, हो नो ग्लास इज हाफ एम्प्टी भन्यो भने यहाँदेखि यहाँसम्मको भागलाई उसले भन्यो नि। यसमा के थाहा हुन्छ त भन्दा we know the attitude of the people, we know the spirit of the people. जसले हाफ एम्प्टी भन्छ त्यो भनेको के हो त, that person might be of a negative attitude, only see the emptiness. हाफ फुल भन्यो भने हामीले के सोच्छौँ, oh this person has the positiveness, this person sees from the positive ways and to the fields of the fullness. Oh, in the way we can develop different kinds of inquiry behaviors in us. That's why scientific study does the first thing is developing inquiry behaviors. And next thing is we are talking about the scientific principles. The scientific principles. So what is the scientific principle? That you have to know these things well. Here you can see the principles. The first thing is there must be clarity. The language items, the language levels, or the study process must be clear. Your scientificness level. We must have the clear purpose of the study. We need to identify the clarity for the study. जो study गर्छौं, जो पाठ हामीले हेर्छौं त्यो के हुनु पर्यो? There must be clarity. Similarly, that must be simple. If that is simple, it could be comprehensible. बुझ्नु पनि पर्यो नि त, जो हामीले स्टडी गर्छौं स्टडी गर्ने कुरा चाहिँ सिम्पल हुनु पर्यो र सिम्पल भइसकेपछि that must be comprehensible, understandable. Next thing is the principle must be transferable, that whatever I learn I need to transfer to the others. मैले मात्र सिक्ने हैन नि त, मैले सिकिसकेको कुरा चाहिँ मैले अरूलाई शेयर गर्न पनि सक्नु पर्यो, मैले सिकिसकेको कुरा मैले अरूलाई ट्रान्सफर गर्न पनि सक्नु पर्यो। Relative means what? That is the change. Just हामी पढ्छौं, that the change in the languages. Language change हुन्छ, language shift हुन्छ. Like for example, हामी मानौ दैलेखबाट आएका छौं, दैलेखमा चाहिँ अब दैलेखमा मानौ छकाल भनिन्थ्यो। जब सुर्खेतमा आएर एक दुई बस्छौं, एक दुई वर्ष बसिसकेपछि त्यो छकाललाई हामी बिहान भन्न सिक्छौं। त्यो के हो त? That is the change in the language. That's why in the scientific principles there we have to think about the relativeness. Relativeness means that must be contextual. We have to change ourselves as per the context, and that must seen in the scientific study. Scientific study always believe towards the relative concept, and scientific study always believes to the change of the realities. There must not be fixed change. change must be relative. Change must be there must be change something or contextual, like consistent. Whenever we are doing study, we have to follow the same pattern. एउटै प्याटर्न फलो गर्नु पर्यो। जस्तो हामी लेख्दाखेरि हामी ह्यान्ड राइटिङ लेख्छौँ नि हामी कपीमा लेख्दाखेरि हाम्रो कहाँनिर कुनै लाइनमा यति ठुला अक्षर कुनै लाइनमा सानो अक्षर लेख्दैनौँ नि, हामी एउटै प्रकारका अक्षर लेख्छौँ। त्यो के हो? कन्सिस्टेन्सी हो के। So we have to bring such kinds of consistency. We have to bring the uniqueness. We have to bring the formality. We have to bring the sameness from the beginning to the end. This is called the consistency. Next thing is systematic. The principle of the scientific study is being the systematic. It must be systematic. There must be systematic ways. This means what? Whenever something is clear, whenever that is simple, understandable, whenever that is transferable, whenever that is relative, changeable, and that is the uniformity to the whole text, to the whole study, then it will be systemic. To be systemic, we have to manage all of the principles. To be systemic, we have to manage all of the ideas which are over there one. That's why linguistics, the second part of the linguistics of the scientific study is what? It must have the principles. We have to follow the scientific principles. These are known as the scientific principles. The first thing, we have to talk about the inquiry behaviors. The second thing, we have to follow the scientific principles. Are you getting my points? Any
Yes,
problem?
sir.
Any problem? So that, and next thing we are talking about, okay, yes, let's see, this is the third component of being scientificness. A third component of being scientificness, that we focus what means linguistics is the scientific study of language. And to have the scientific study, yes, to have the scientific study, we have to follow these three things. Never forget: inquiry behaviors, scientific principles, and scientific methodology. The things must be studied within some methodology, within the process. कस्तो methodology हुन्छ त? कस्तो हुन्छ? कुन हो के हो methodology भनेको कुरा हामीलाई थाहा पाउनु पर्यो नि त. Like for this one, the first thing we have to do, we need to identify the problem. What we are going to study. Yes, we need to identify the problem first. After identifying the problem, we have to observe that thing. We need to observe. हेर्नु पर्यो त्यो कसरी भइराखेको छ, के भइराखेको छ भन्ने कुरा त हेर्नु पर्यो नि त. Problem identify गर्यो तर चाहिँ just see your problem is like using language accurately. Language accurately use गर्नै सकिराखेको छैन आफूले भनेपछि अब हामीले के गर्नु पर्यो त भन्दा मेरो प्रब्लम त आइडेन्टिफाई भयो नि, हाउ क्यान आई युज द ल्याङ्ग्वेज एक्युरेटली. पहिला बितेको कुरालाई कसरी भन्ने, पछिको कुरालाई कसरी भन्ने, अहिलेको कुरा कसरी भन्ने, आफूलाई प्रब्लम छ भनेपछि यु आइडेन्टिफाई. त्यसपछि यु अब्जर्भ द एक्टिभिटिज डन बाई द अदर्स. र अर्कोले चाहिँ कसरी भन्दो रहेछ त्यसलाई हेर्छौँ हामी, पढ्छौँ हामी, अब्जर्भेसन हामी पढ्छौँ, हेर्छौँ. द्याट वी डु. देन वी मेक द हाइपोथेसिस. मैले अब यसो गर्नुपर्छ है भन्ने बनाउँछौँ नि हामी. अर्कोले गरेको हेरिसकेपछि मैले चाहिँ अब यसो गर्नुपर्छ, इफ आई डु दिस थिङ आई क्यान डु. हामी परिकल्पना बनाउँछौँ कि हामी वी मेक द हाइपोथेसिस, वी मेक समटाइम्स द प्रिसपोजिसन्स, बिकज हाइपोथेसिस इज what means this is the untested theory. Hypothesis is the theory which is not tested. We begin to think. म कल्पना गर्न सुरु गर्छु. त्यसपछि मैले चाहिँ मेरो ग्रामर इम्प्रुभ गर्नको लागि यो गर्नुपर्छ, फलानुले ग्रामर इम्प्रुभ गर्नको लागि यो गरे रहेछ हैन. जस्तो ल सपोज प्रकृति सिंहलाई एउटा कुनै प्रब्लम भयो, प्रकृतिले चाहिँ यो प्रब्लम मैले अब जस्तो मानौ यो मेबी प्रब्लम अफ राइटिङ द लेटर्स, राइटिङ एप्लिकेसन लेटर्स, राइटिङ एनी फर्मल लेटर्स भनेपछि अब मैले कसरी लेख्ने होला, मलाई जहिले पनि यसमा प्रब्लम छ भने आइडेन्टिफाई गर्यो. त्यसपछि उसले चाहिँ गोमाले लेखेको लेटरहरू हेर्यो, रेशमाले लेखेको लेटरहरू हेर्यो, सङ्गमले लेखेको लेटरहरू हेर्यो। त्यो के भयो त अब्जर्भेसन। ए साथीहरू रहेछन् है, ल गोमाले यसरी लेखा रहेछ, रेशमाले यसरी लेखा रहेछ, पूजाले यसरी लेखा रहेछ, सङ्गमले यसरी लेखा रहेछ। र उसले हेरिसकेपछि अब मैले यसरी लेख्छु, अब यस आई विल डु इन द वे भनेर एउटा परिकल्पना बनाउँछ क्या। त्यो बनाए के हो त हाइपोथेसिस हो। सो द्याट मस्ट बी इन द मेथोडोलोजी। र त्यो बनाइसकेपछि अब मैले यो गर्छु भनेर बनाइसकेपछि उसले एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसन गर्छ। देन स्टार्ट राइटिङ, स्टार्ट डुइङ समथिङ। देन आफ्टर यस यो चाहिँ वे रहेछ है भनेर उसले चाहिँ थियरी बनाउँछ के, दिस इज द वे टु इम्प्रुभ द राइटिङ लेटर्स, यो तरिका रहेछ है भन्छ। यदि चाहिँ अब एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसन गर्दाखेरि पनि इम्प्रुभ भएन भने चाहिँ ओ आई अगेन गो टु दिस स्टेप। त्यहाँ फेरि के गर्नुपर्छ त म, आई निड टु गो हियर। यदि एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसन गरेर एट फर्स्ट आई आइडेन्टिफाई द प्रब्लम, यो यहाँ जान्छ, दिस इज इन द अर्डर। अब्जर्भेसन पछि हाइपोथेसिसमा जान्छ, र हाइपोथेसिस के हुन्छ एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसनमा जान्छ, एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसनले थियरी बनाउँछ, र त्यो थियरीको बारेमा चाहिँ रिफ्लेक्सन हुन्छ है। यति प्रोसेस हुन्छ यसमा, दिस इज द प्रोसेस। र यदि चाहिँ त्यो हामीले स्टडी गरेको कुरामा हामीले बनाएको हाइपोथेसिस अब्जर्भेसन अनुसार एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसन पनि गरियो, टेस्ट पनि गरियो, तर आफूलाई चित्त बुझ्दो भएन भने हामी फेरि के गर्छौँ, जस्ट सी हियर, हामी फेरि के गर्छौँ त भन्दा likewise like okay I will use this color, okay like from here we go to this stage है, हामी यो स्टेजमा जान्छौँ फेरि है। this is the process of the scientific methodology, like this is the process of researching को process पनि हो, scientific methodology को processing पनि हो, that you have to do. Yes, so that in the scientific study what we know, you have to be clear on this fact that at the first we need to identify the problem. Don't forget, I need to identify the problem. After identifying the problem, I need to observe the ideas. Then after I have to make some hypothesis. Then I have to test it. This testing means experimentation. After having the experimentation, the theory is produced. Yes, that's right. Oh, that is not. I need to go again. Then after other people begin to reflect on this. Yes, this is the way. This person developed this. We do in the way. Like you can take the example of language teaching methods. At the first, there was the grammar translation method. People use grammar translation method. Like other are observing and they are experimenting. And if they don't find, that's fine. Okay, so we need to change the method. Then there is come and the direct method. Oh, that is not also again useful. Then we have to develop cooperative learning on the concept. This is from the scientific study. Scientific study आगो process हो नि त, र scientific study को methodology त्यसले के गर्छ follow गर्छ। त्यसकारण you have to consider these three things. So whenever you are defining linguistics is the scientific study of language. Yes, whenever you are defining linguistics in the first slide that we defined, linguistics as the scientific study of language. At the first, there you can see here. Yes, you can see here. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. And for this thing, what is language that we have already discussed? You know about this. Then here you know about the scientific study. To be the scientific study, understand this thing, we must have three things. Okay, so can anyone say these three things? What are these three things? Anyone, please? Bimala Lamichani. Bimala, are you listening me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so could you tell me what are the things that make the study scientific? Tell me, please. What happens? Any problem? Okay, so I'm asking with Priyanka Thara. Priyanka, are you listening me? Priyanka? Hello. Okay, so I'm seeing Sangam here. Sangam.
Sorry, sir, I don't know.
Yes, because you came late. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so listen carefully. Listen carefully again once more. I'm telling you. So we define linguistics is the scientific study of language. So what is that? For this thing, we have to know what makes the study scientific and how the study can be scientific. To थाहा पाउनु पर्यो नि हामीले. अब study scientific हुनको लागि there must be three things. Never forget. Whenever you are making the study scientific, you have to focus to the three things. And the first thing is what? There must be scientificness. That is called what? Scientific spirit. Do you get my point? The first thing is there must be scientific spirit. Scientific or inquiry behavior. ममा इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर हुनु पर्यो के ए मैले यो गर्नुपर्छ यो कसरी भयो किन भयो अर्कोले भनेको हामीले ठ्याक्कै बिलिभ नगरिकन यो कसरी भयो त किन यो भयो किन अर्को भएन why we accept this किन हामीले यसलाई मान्यौ त भन्ने खालको इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर आफूमा डेभलप गर्नु पर्यो के द फर्स्ट थिङ अलवेज साइन्टिफिक हुनको लागि हामीमा इन्क्वायरी बिहेभियर डेभलप गर्नु पर्यो दैट इज कल्ड द साइन्टिफिक स्पिरिट दोस्रो साइन्टिफिक हुनको लागि सम सर्टेन साइन्टिफिक प्रिन्सिपलहरु छ that we talked these scientific प्रिन्सिपलहरुलाई फलो गर्नु पर्यो we need to follow the scientific principles जो अघि हामीले भन्यौ scientific principles just you can see क्लियर हुनु पर्यो सिम्पल हुनु पर्यो कम्प्रिहेन्सिबल बुझ्न योग्य हुनु पर्यो ट्रान्सफरेबल एकले अर्कालाई दिन सक्ने लिन सक्ने हुनु पर्यो रिलेटिभ that must be changeable according to the time अनुसार चेन्ज हुने हुनु पर्यो कन्सिस्टेन्ट फर्मालिटी हुनु पर्यो एकरूपता हुनु पर्यो स्ट्रक्चरमा एकरूपता हुनु पर्यो सिस्टमेटिक हुनु पर्यो that must be well arranged well organized हुनु पर्यो and the second thing is what we have to follow the scientific principles then the third thing हामीले भन्यौ साइन्टिफिक हुनको लागि स्टडीको आफ्नै मेथड हुन्छ प्रोसेस हुन्छ त्यो प्रोसेसलाई फलो गर्नु पर्यो एउटा निश्चित मेथोडोलोजीलाई फलो गर्नु पर्यो र त्यो मेथोडोलोजीमा के हुन्छ भन्दा सुरुमा हामीले प्रब्लम आइडेन्टिफाई गर्छौं र त्यो प्रब्लम सम्बन्धी अब्जर्भेसन गर्छौं र त्यसमा हामीले हाइपोथेसिस बनाउँछौं र त्यसपछि हामीले एक्सपेरिमेन्टेसन टेस्टिङ गर्छौं र बल्ल हामीले गर्छौं ओ दिस इज राइट दिस इज रङ भन्ने कुरा निकाल्छौं र त्यो चाहिँ कम्युनिटीमा पठाउँछौं र कम्युनिटीले के गर्छ रिफ्लेक्सन गर्छ त्यसकारण POHETR पोइटर अथवा you can add only observation hypothesis testing and theory OHET पनि भन्न सक्छौं हामी त्यसकारण चाहिँ to be scientificness you have to follow these three qualities never forget three qualities must be followed there must be inquiry behavior there must be scientific principles and there must be scientific methodology did you get my point did you get my point now
Yes, sir.
Sangam. So could you see what did you understand now okay what makes the study scientific okay Sangam please tell केले साइन्टिफिक बनाउँदो रहेछ त के कुरा फलो गर्नु पर्दो रहेछ हामीले okay you are speaking yeah okay
Sir, first the behavior.
Inquiry behaviors.
Yeah, inquiry behavior, then principle, then
Yes.
methodology.
Yes, we need to follow these three things to the every topic, to the every ideas. Yes, then after we can be scientific. Yes, then next thing, I was asking with Priyanka. Priyanka, are you listening me? Priyanka? Either she's there or not. Okay, please, you have to speak. Hey, this is also your attendance of the work. Okay, so then we know linguistics is the scientific study of language. We know language, then what makes study scientific? You have to consider these points. Okay, then next thing is very important thing in the case of discussing about the scientificness, what we study or do. भन्दा हामी के अध्ययन गर्छौँ त त्यहाँ अब भाषाको बारेमा के अध्ययन गर्छौँ त भन्दा लिङ्ग्विस्टिक्स इज द साइन्टिफिक स्टडी अफ ल्याङ्ग्वेज भनेका छौँ हामीले भाषाको के कुरालाई हेर्छौँ त भन्दा we study what? We study the nature of language. This is the thing. Never forget. We study the nature of language. Then we establish a theory of language also. We are talking different theories about the language, different realities about the language, different phases of the language. Then which might be appropriate for us? We need to think. That's why we establish theory of language. Similarly, we describe a language based on theory. Yes, we describe the language. There are the different features of the languages. There are different theories. And with the nation, there we identify the different feature and we describe that one. Then we study about all aspects of the level of the languages. Right? We study all aspects and the levels. Just like there we study about phonology, we study about grammar, we study about meaning, we study about the context. These things, these aspects and the level of the language that is studied. That's why linguistics, now we can say that linguistics is the scientific study of language, in the sense that it studies the language scientifically. It studies the language systematically. It studies the language in some certain process. There is some certain process of language study, and the linguistic follow that way. Yes, there are some different realities or different questions or different perceptions towards the language also, and this is also studied by the language and the linguistics. Okay, so do you have any questions with this about the linguistic is the scientific study of language? You can put your questions if you have any questions. Now your turn. Okay, please, no question. As if here is no questions. Yes. If no question, then after I will ask you questions. If you don't ask, I will ask. Okay? Yes. And up to now, just review for some seconds. We studied what is language. We defined the different features of the language. We discussed about the semiotic view of language. We discussed about long and parole. We discussed about competence and performance. And now we discussed linguistics as the scientific study of language. Yes, linguistics as the scientific study of language. With this notion, what we find ourselves, what we get ourselves, that whenever we are defining linguistics as the scientific study of language, this is the systemic process of studying the language. Never forget this point. This is the process of studying the language. What does linguistics do? Means linguistics studies the language. This is the part of studying the things. So this is like what? This is like the course book and the students. Like you can connect language with the course book, and you can connect students as the linguistics. Who studies this course is the course or कसले पढ्छ विद्यार्थीले पढ्छ नि students study the courses and student develop inquiry behaviors, student develop some terms of scientific principles, student follow the methodology. So you can connect that one, that language is for your courses and you students yourself as the linguistics. You can connect that example to one. So this is the process of the study. How do you study? हामी कसरी पढ्छौँ? पढ्ने काम त विद्यार्थीको हो. विद्यार्थीले कसरी पढ्छ त? त्यो पढ्ने मटेरियल छ. त्यो पढ्ने मटेरियललाई उसले कसरी पढ्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ that is like the function of the linguistics. Linguistic function पनि त्यस्तै हो. Linguisticsले कसरी स्टडी गर्छ त? On a study process that we talked. The same thing. The first thing is you have to develop your scientific behaviors or inquiry behaviors. This is called the scientific spirit. So understand that scientific spirit, scientific principles, and scientific methodology. You never have to forget these three things whenever you are defining linguistics as the scientific study of language, not only to the linguistics. If anyone asks you what are the different features are there in the scientific study, in the scientific study, these features are being working there. So by this nature, what we understand, by this nature, what we find means linguistics is, our linguistics has the greater contribution in reforming the language, in identifying the different features of the language. So the language को हामीले feature पढ्यौं नि, वो language को feature कसरी identify भएको हो त भन्दा, that is identified linguistically. This is identified by the linguistics because linguistic studies that and identify these features. And like similarly, there is in language, there is the sound system. In language, there is the grammar. We learn about the words, we learn about sentences, we learn about discourses. Then language has the meaning. Like similar language has the different contexts or pragmatics. So this means these are what? These are known as the different levels, and which is also studied by the language, not linguistics. So linguistics as a whole, linguistics studies the language with its process. That process is known as the scientific. So this process of the study of the language is known as the scientific study. And we need to follow these three things. Never forget these three things. You always have to make, so you are the students of linguistics, that's why make these three things. List it and paste in your classroom. Every day you will see there, oh, linguistics is the scientific study of language. Scientific study includes what? Inquiry behavior first, you have to see. And in the other corner, just put scientific principles. What are the principles there? Then in the corner, put scientific methodology. Yes, these are the methodologies you have to put. In the three corners of your room, you can post. Then you know, oh, to study something scientifically, to study some processes, we have to follow this. I must develop my inquiry behaviors. I must not take something granted by others. I should not believe to others. अर्कोले जे भन्छ मैले त्यो बिलिभ गर्ने हैन, यो भने यो रहेछ है भन्यो भने होला होला, हैन त्यो भने त अलि फरक रहेछ नि त, यसो रहेछ नि त, ए त्यसो रहेछ, म त यो बुझिया थिए. फेरि अर्को आयो, यो भने चाहिँ यो पनि हैन, यो पनि हैन, यो रहेछ नि त, यो हो र भन्ने हाम्रो बानीको विकास नहोस् भने हो के. We have to look for, we have to develop the culture of the inquiry. We need to think about this. This is first thing about being the scientific. Next thing, whenever you are following something, whenever you are doing something, you have to follow the principle. That must be clear. Clarity हुनु पर्यो नि, बुझ्न योग्य हुनु पर्यो, स्पष्ट हुनु पर्यो, सरल हुनु पर्यो, अनि त्यो चेन्जेबल हुनु पर्यो. That is called changeable. Transferability, you can transfer from one to another, that can be changed from time to time. And that must follow the systemic process. And then after, whenever I'm studying something, at the first I need to identify the problem. Problem identify मैले गर्न सकिन भनेपछि मैले स्टडी गर्न सक्दैन. सुरुमा त मैले problem identify गर्नु पर्यो नि. I need to identify the problem first. After identifying the problem, I have to observe. अरूले कसरी गरिरहेछ, के गरिरहेछ भन्ने कुरा मैले हेर्नु पर्यो. हेरिसकेपछि यसले यो गरा रहेछ, यसले यो गरा रहेछ, मैले पनि यसो गर्छु. अनि हाइपोथेसिस बनाउनु पर्यो नि. त्यो हाइपोथेसिस बनाइसकेपछि अब म पनि यसलाई एक्सपेरिमेन्ट गर्छु, टेस्ट गर्छु, ल के रहेछ त यो. अनि टेस्ट गरिसकेपछि यदि युजफुल भयो भने त्यो के हुन्छ, थ्योरीमा कन्भर्ट हुन्छ. यदि युजफुल भएन भने फेरि यु गो ब्याक टु द अब्जर्भेसन है. जब थ्योरीमा कन्भर्ट हुन्छ, देन आफ्टर इट गोज फर द रिफ्लेक्सन. Yes, it goes for the reflection, because that goes for the personal reflection or that goes for the community reflection. That's why linguistics is defined as the scientific study of language in the whole sense that linguistics does the systematic study of the language. This is our discussion for today. So all of you, please go through the materials. I'll post there in your classroom also, and be updated, and bring some questions in the classroom also. There I posted one book of John Lines. You have to go through that book because that's your very basic book. Yes, that's your very basic book. You have to go through the book of John Lines. That is given clearly, and in our next class we will discuss about the branches of linguistics. For this thing, whenever we are doing the different branches of linguistics, I will ask you first. I'll ask you first, what are the branches of linguistics? That's why come by studying some materials, which I'll post there one recently.